Alright, so in Module 2, Lesson 2, we're going to start with this diagram. And I would like to know what is the simplest transformation that would map one of these figures onto the other one so that they line up evenly. And I'm guessing that you're going to probably say slide. And the word that we're going to use with that is translation. So, in the next few lessons, we're going to learn about the three kinds of simple rigid motions, which are translation, reflection, and rotation. They're called rigid motions because they keep their original, or the shape of the original figure. It does not change shapes. In the following, we're going to describe how to move a transparency over a piece of paper to demonstrate the effect of these basic rigid motions. Effect each of these motions have on points on a plane. And we're going to start with one similar to this, which is a translation. So, here we are. We have this shape. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to end up using this and moving, and I'm going to move from the one on the left to the one on the right. Okay, and we can do that with our transparency. We can trace it and we can move it. Pretty simple. Let me show you that real quick. Too bad I already erased it earlier. And I'm tracing on the inside so it lines up on the inside. You can trace on the lines or on the inside, whichever you're comfortable. So then I could take this and I can move it and line it up here. Okay. Now, when I do that, okay, I can use a basic rigid motion. I'm going to use my phone here. Okay, and I can draw a vector from one point to the other. Now, I'm going to show you what this looks like. Okay, and I'm just going to go from this corner to this corner. Okay, and all that is, and I'm going to line it up so I get it right. Here's the end of my vector. Maybe I'll be able to draw this. I'm going to draw it to here. Whoop. And hopefully, like, see how that doesn't line up so well? Hopefully yours does. But all a vector is an arrow that moves one point to another point. Okay, and that's a vector. Okay. And it's represented with a tail and a tip. So this is our arrow. Here's our tail. And here's our tip. Now, to name this, okay, we are going to have to know what the name is for the vector. So, for example, if this is x, y, this becomes vector x, y. Now, you can write it the other way, vector x, y, but the label that's on the tail, the letter that's on the tail is the one you write first. Okay, so down here we're going to practice writing our vectors. Okay, so this vector here is vector A, B. This vector here is vector B, A. Everybody see the difference? A is at the tail, so it goes first. B is at the tip, so it goes second. And here it's opposite, so B goes first and then A. Okay. And now we're just going to do some examples where we take a point and move it along a vector. And what I'm going to do here is I've drawn them, and I'm just going to show you some examples using a transparency and the marker and a couple different things. Okay, so I'm going to start with my transparency. Erase this. Okay, and I'm going to move it over a little because of how my vector is going, the direction of my vector. And right now I'm just going to move a point. Okay, so I'm going to put a point right here. I'll label it P. I have my line. And all I'm going to do is take this and I'm going to put it behind my paper. Okay? And then the goal here is to line up the vector. So if you can see through there, my vectors line up. Okay? So the tail of the vector lines up with the tip. And then up here, through the paper, we can see that there's a point up here. I just labeled a point and put P prime. I don't have to redraw that vector. You're welcome to if that helps you, but you don't have to redraw that vector. Okay, so there's one example. So now this time, I'm going to do the same thing, except for now I'm going to move 2 points and a line. Let me move it up so you can see it. Okay. So here I have point X, and I have point Y, and I have my line Z. Do you see now why we need fine tips? And then we're going to trace the vector. Now, same thing. I'm going to take this and put it underneath. And it might be a little bit difficult. Okay, I put it on the edge, so now it won't let my paper go over, and it doesn't line up. It's way over here. So I'm going to redraw this. That's what happens sometimes. Sometimes you have to redraw it on your transparency. Okay, vector X, Y, Z. Okay, so now I'm going to put it under here. I'm going to line it up again. And I'm going to draw this. So now I'm looking through the paper again for my points. Okay, I've lined it up. Here my vector. So now I'm going to draw right here. There is Z prime. There is Y prime. And there's X prime. My vector is here. I'll draw that in so you guys can see it. Right there lined up. The goal is to line that up and then trace the other points that are there. Now, we can do this another way. Okay, and I may be getting a little ahead of myself, but that's okay. We can do this another way where we take a shape and a line and we actually put in the vector. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I got this shape over here, C. I'm going to trace it. I have this line. And then I have this one. Well, all I'm going to do is draw from here to here. So I've put in my own vector. And now I'm going to put it behind. I'm going to line up the vector and line up this line W. Okay? So I just put it behind. I line up my W prime, or my W with my W prime, like this. My vector is there. I guess maybe I didn't need it after all, because we can do this with our original and our image line. And then I would just take my pen or pencil and I would trace my shape and label it C prime. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to move into doing one that is the same. Now we can do, well, let me step back. We can do something similar to this and use an angle, or we can use whatever shape we feel like using, whatever shape is given. Okay? But that's what we're doing. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to move into the lesson where you can actually work along with me. So it says draw at least 3 different vectors and show what a translation of the plane along each vector looks like. Describe what happens to the figures under each translation using appropriate vocabulary and notation as needed. Okay, right now I want you to pause the video and move 3 of these shapes along whatever vector you do. And then when you're done with those, I want you to come back and kind of see how I've done it so that you can repeat it. Okay, so I'm going to start off. So pause the video before I go on anymore, and then I'm going to start. Okay, so I'm going to move S according to this vector. I'm going to move Q according to this vector. And I'm going to move R according to this vector. So I'm going to have to move 3 things. Okay. So I'm going to start with S. Okay. Of course, you trace your shape. And your vector. Then you're going to put your shape, or put it underneath, and you're going to have to watch really close. You're going to want to line up the end of your vectors. Okay, I've got my vectors lined up. So now I want to come back and I want to trace my shape. Okay, so I'm going to have to be very careful. And that would be S prime. Then I'm going to repeat that with Q and R. If I can find my dry erase marker, rolled way away. So I'm going to repeat that with Q and R. So we line up the vectors, and what happens when we do that is our shape sometimes goes over our original vector, and in this case it's going to go over other shapes that are in a picture. Something kind of like that, and that would be Q prime. I didn't draw it so great, but that's okay, you get the idea. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing for R. Okay. Oh, it rolled away again. Okay, so I'm going to trace R. And you want to be as precise as possible when you're tracing these and when you're writing them down, because it does maintain the shape, so you want the shape to be pretty much the same. So now I'm just going to put my paper underneath. And on this one they don't overlap because of how it is on here. Put this over here so it doesn't roll away. And then I'm going to draw. Ooh, sometimes it's going to be a little difficult. That's okay. You just got to be very precise. And when you do these, you want to make sure that you label them. So S prime, Q prime, you can't see that very well, and R prime. So then you're going to want to put in some information about this. So each figure moved, okay, according to quote unquote moved according to the vector drawn. Okay. The shapes remained the same size. Okay, and that's very important that you know that the shapes remain the same size. Okay, very, very important that you know. Now, we're going to do the same thing, except for we're going to move geometric figures. So in exercise 2, we're going to do the same thing. Pretty much, it says in the diagram below shows the figures and their images under the translation of HI. Okay, HI is over here. We're moving it from H to I. It's not connected to any of them, and that's okay as well. Okay, use the original figures and the translated images to fill in the missing labels for points and measures. So we're going to use prime notation. So first you got to look at this and you got to realize, okay, some of these are originals and some of these are the image. Okay, so right here, A, B, C is original. E is original. This doesn't have any. These two are the image. And D is prime is the image. So when there's a prime, there's an apostrophe. Those are the images. When there's just letters, those are the originals. So we're going to do exactly what this says, and all I'm going to do, actually they're already moved. All you have to do is fill in the missing letters. So this shape matches this shape. So this would become A prime, B prime, C prime, and you would also want to mark this as 31 degrees because it keeps the same measure. Okay? Here we have these. This is F prime and G prime. It matches this one. So this would be F and this would be G. Now on these two, this is the original. So this would be E prime. This is D prime, so this would be D. This is 5 centimeters, so this would become 5 centimeters as well. Now, before we move on to the end, I do want to talk to you a little bit about a few things. Now, after we've done this, do you believe that a translation maps lines to lines, segments to segments, points to points, angles to angles? Does a translation do that? Yes, it does. Does a translation preserve the length of the segment? Yes, it does. So, if we have 2 points on a plane, okay, skip that. Okay, so it mapped angles to angles.
At this time, will Team Rockin report to the gym and also the teachers for their pictures.
Okay, so the angle was preserved, and as well as the angle measure was preserved. Okay, and then we can go to the end here, and we could talk about, we can do a summary here. Okay. Okay, so a vector, okay, is a segment that you connect to an endpoint. Okay, it's called an initial point or a starting point to the other endpoint, which is the terminal point or the end point. And it has the tail and the tip. Okay, we've talked about that. Okay, the length of the vector, okay, is defined by the length of a segment. Okay, so this is a picture. So from A to B, this would be vector AB. And here, this would be vector BA. And I guess if you want to really, just always draw the arrow to your right. Okay, a translation of a plane along a given vector is a basic rigid motion of a plane. Okay, so no matter what you're translating it on, it's going to be a plane, and it's going to be a basic rigid motion. And then these are the properties that you're going to use a lot. Okay, and you're going to see them often because some of these properties mirror into the other rigid motions we're going to talk about. So a translation maps a line to a line, array to array, a segment to a segment, and an angle to an angle. A translation preserves the length of segments. Okay, and a translation preserves the measure of angles. We saw all of this back in exercise 2 right here. Okay, so we saw all of that there. And then there's some terminology there, so you can kind of learn some terminology. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to move on, and you're going to do this problem set. This problem set is 8 questions, so it's the front and back of S7. It's S7 and S8. Once you've finished this, I want you to check your answers with me, and then I want you to, after you've checked your answers and made corrections, you'll move on to your exit ticket, and then you'll check your answers and make corrections there as well. Okay? That's all for lesson 2.